I gave up my father's last goodbye for a man who couldn't even give me the truth. I crossed an ocean at 25, carrying nothing but faith in a man named Rishabh, and a promise we made together: build first, dream later. So I said yes to 11 years of counting every dollar. Yes to missing my cousin's wedding on a video call. Yes to watching my nephew grow up through a phone screen. Yes to sitting 4,000 miles away, staring at photographs of my own father's funeral, because there was no money and no time to fly home and hold his hand one last time. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself every sacrifice was an investment in a future we were building together. I was wrong. While I was skipping funerals to save airfare for our future, my husband was having dinner with someone named Jennifer. Not once, not twice, 4 months of it, while I was still setting 2 cups of chai on the table every morning. This is not a story about a woman who fell apart. This is what it costs to lose everything you sacrificed for and rebuild a life that finally completely belongs to you. My name is Navya. I am 40 years old now, but this story begins when I was 25, fresh out of my master's degree in India, sitting on the floor of my parents' living room while my mother read out a marriage proposal like it was a page from someone else's fate. The man's name was Rishabh. He was already living and working in America. My parents did not hide anything from me. He had been married once before, briefly, and it had ended within months. Both families spoke to each other carefully. Everyone said the same thing: a young mistake, a marriage that simply didn't fit, nothing more. I believed, and I still believe, that people deserve second chances. So with my full consent, we married, and a few months later I left my country, my parents, and every familiar sound of my own life to build something new beside a man I had known for barely a season. I want to tell you clearly, before anything else, what kind of wife I tried to be. Because this story is not only about what he did. It is also about what I gave, quietly, every single day, without ever once being asked to keep score. America was not the dream I had pictured. Rishabh had a decent job, but we were far from settled. There were debts. There were bills that arrived faster than the paychecks that were supposed to cover them. I told him, in those first hard months, we'll build this together. No children yet. First we build the ground under our feet. He agreed completely. We decided together that the coming years would belong entirely to building our future. My Indian degree meant almost nothing here, so I began collecting marketing and branding certifications, one after another, studying at night after long days of part-time work, and an even longer list of household duties that somehow always fell only on me. I would come home from a 10-hour shift, tired in a way that sat deep in my bones, and still I would stand at the stove for an hour, sometimes more, making his favorite dishes from scratch. Rajma the way his mother used to make it, aloo paratha with the exact amount of ghee he liked, dal tempered just the way he preferred, never the way I actually preferred it myself. I never once handed him a plate of leftovers, even on the nights my body begged me to. I did the shopping too, and not just groceries. From my own small paycheck, the one I had fought so hard to start earning, I would set aside money to buy him new shirts for important meetings, a better razor when his old one dulled, the specific brand of shoes he liked, because he said they made him feel confident walking into rooms full of Americans who already belonged there in a way he still felt he had to earn. I knew his sizes better than I knew my own. I knew which color he avoided, which fabric made him itch, which songs calmed him after a hard day at work. I built my entire understanding of comfort around a man and told myself that this was simply what marriage looked like when you truly loved someone. Money was always tight in those years. I kept track of every rupee turned dollar in my head before I even learned to use a spreadsheet properly. We didn't travel back to India, not even once in all those early years. When my cousin got married, I sat in front of a laptop screen and smiled through a blurry video call, clapping along to music I couldn't actually hear well. When my sister gave birth to her first child, I watched my nephew grow month by month only through photographs sent on WhatsApp. When my mother fell sick, I called every single day and prayed on the phone instead of sitting by her bed. And then came the day I still cannot speak about without my chest tightening. My father passed away, and I could not go home for his funeral. Airfare, work commitments, visa complications, the same financial caution that had ruled every decision of our married life. All of it stood between me and my father's final rites. I sat in a small apartment in America, looking at photographs relatives had sent of his last ceremony, and I understood, for the first time, that leaving your country doesn't just create distance between two places. It leaves a hole inside a person that never fully closes. I gave all of this, my time, my body's exhaustion, my family's biggest moments, my own comfort, because I believed I was building something that belonged to both of us equally. I never once thought of it as a debt he owed me. I thought of it as love. I thought that was what devotion looked like. By our 6th year in America, things had genuinely started to improve. Rishabh moved into a senior position at a mid-sized logistics company. I had finished my certifications and, after years of small freelance work, finally landed a real position as a junior brand coordinator at a marketing agency. It wasn't a big title, but it was mine, a desk with my name on it, a login only I could access, a small income that didn't have to be justified to anyone. We moved into a modest townhouse. We bought a car that wasn't 10 years old. For the first time, we breathed a little easier. I remember sitting on our new porch one evening, a cup of chai slowly going cold in my hands, thinking that we had finally crossed to the other side of the hard years, that every sacrifice had meant something, that we were, at last, arriving somewhere together. I did not know the hard part was only changing its shape. It started with small things, so small that a woman busy running a household and a career could easily explain each one away on her own. Rishabh began attending more work dinners, client entertainment. He called it. His company had recently partnered with a logistics firm in Ohio, which meant frequent calls, frequent trips, late nights reviewing contracts. I did not question it. Why would I? I respected his ambition. I was proud of how far he had come from the anxious young man who had once counted coins with me at our kitchen table. But there were details, small ones, the kind that slide past you like water through open fingers, until one day you realize your hands are completely empty. He started ironing his own shirts. In 11 years, he had never once done this himself. One Tuesday morning, I found him at the ironing board, pressing his collar with a strange, careful tenderness I hadn't seen in him before. I asked, half joking, "Since when do you know how to use an iron?" He laughed and said he wanted to look sharp for a client meeting. I laughed too and didn't think about it again, not for weeks. Then there was his phone case. Scratched, worn, 3 years old. One evening he came home with a new one, sleek, the kind you'd see in an advertisement aimed at someone younger than us. He said the old one had cracked. Later, out of nothing more than idle habit, I checked the old case. It hadn't cracked at all. None of these things on their own would have meant anything. A new phone case is not a confession. An iron shirt is not betrayal. But the accumulation did something to me slowly, like fog rolling over a field. I began to feel that my husband was, in small and careful ways, becoming a slightly different man than the one who had left for work that same morning. I want to be honest about something else here. How hard I worked to explain away every single sign. This is the part of the story I find hardest to tell, because it means admitting how much I doubted my own instincts in order to protect a version of my marriage that had already stopped existing. When his answers about his trip schedule grew shorter and more clipped, I told myself he was simply exhausted from work. When his phone, which used to sit face up on the kitchen counter without a second thought, started staying in his pocket even during dinner, I told myself every man needs some small private space, that this was healthy, that I was being insecure. When he began taking calls on the back porch with the door shut, even in the cold months, I told myself it was probably office politics he didn't want to burden me with. Each time some small alarm rang inside me, I answered it not with suspicion toward him, but with suspicion toward myself. I have been too tired lately. I have been too lonely, missing my family, and I am inventing problems to fill the space where our old closeness used to be. I am imagining things because I have too much time to think. Every single time, I turned the doubt back onto my own mind instead of letting it land where it actually belonged. Meanwhile, I kept doing what I had always done. I kept his favorite spices stocked in the kitchen. I kept buying him small things with my own money, a new watch strap, his preferred brand of tea, a warmer jacket before winter set in, small gestures of care that I never once expected him to repay because I believed our marriage worked like that. I give, he gives, and somewhere in the middle we meet as equals. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and found the bed empty. I walked to the living room and saw him sitting on the couch in the dark, his phone lighting up his face, thumb moving quickly across the screen. When he noticed me, he flipped the phone face down, so fast it nearly slid off the cushion. He said he couldn't sleep, that he was just reading the news. I said nothing and went back to bed, staring at the ceiling until the sky turned gray, telling myself, again, that marriages have quiet seasons, that this was simply one of them, that seasons pass. I confided in exactly one person during those months, my closest friend here, a woman named Deepa, whom I had met through the same certification course years earlier. 2 immigrant women trying to build careers from nothing in a country that did not make it easy for either of us. Over coffee, one Saturday, I told her something felt different with Rishabh. I could not name it. I only said I felt like I was slowly becoming a guest inside my own marriage. She didn't tell me what to think. She only said, trust what your body is telling you before your mind catches up. The body always knows first. I held on to that sentence far longer than I expected to. The truth arrived in the end through something almost embarrassingly ordinary. It was my sister-in-law's birthday, and I wanted to order flowers through a delivery account Rishabh had originally set up. My own phone was charging in the other room, so I used his laptop, left open on the dining table while he showered. I was not looking for anything. I want that understood clearly because it matters to me even now. I opened the browser, and because his email was still logged in, a small calendar notification slid down the screen. It read, "Dinner, Jay, 7:30 p.m., usual place." My hand froze over the keyboard. I told myself immediately that it could mean anything. Jennifer could be a client, a colleague discussing numbers over a meal, which happens in every industry, every single day. But something made me click into the calendar itself. Not to snoop, I told myself, only to understand a meeting my own husband had never mentioned. There, laid out in neat blue blocks going back nearly 4 months, were more entries. Dinner, Jay. Coffee, Jay, before flight. Call, Jay, 9 p.m. For months, while I had been telling myself, night after night, that season's pass. I closed the laptop exactly as I had found it and sat very still. When Rishabh came out of the shower, humming under his breath, I asked him, as steadily as I could manage, "Who is Jennifer?" Something moved across his face. Not shock, more like the stillness of a man who had been quietly waiting longer than he would ever admit for this exact question to finally arrive. He didn't lie outright. Jennifer, he said, was the project lead from the Ohio partnership. They had been working closely for almost a year. What began as calls about shipment schedules had, somewhere along the way, become something he hadn't planned for and didn't know how to stop. I asked the one question I had been holding since the calendar entries. Was it physical? He looked at the floor for a long moment before he said yes. Not always, but yes. I did not scream. I did not throw anything, though something in me wanted to. I sat at the dining table, where I had cooked 11 years of his favorite dinners, where I had studied for certifications by lamplight after 12-hour days, where I had once wrapped small gifts bought with my own salary because I wanted him to feel cared for. And I felt the entire architecture of my life fold in on itself, floor by floor, without a single sound. He said the words I have since learned almost every unfaithful person says, as if handed down through generations of guilty men. It wasn't supposed to happen. He had tried to end it twice. He was confused. He used that word the way some people use punctuation, just to fill space between more honest sentences he didn't have the courage to say. I asked him one final question that night. Had he ever, even once, thought about what it had cost me to be standing in that kitchen at all? The wedding I missed, the nephew I never held as a baby, my father's funeral I watched only through photographs because there was no money and no time to fly home. Had any of that crossed his mind during the 4 months he spent having dinner with Jennifer? He didn't answer. His silence was the answer. That night, something inside me simply gave way. I moved into the guest room, not out of drama, but because I genuinely did not know, lying beside him, whose bed I was even in anymore. I lay awake replaying 11 years like a film reel. The shirts I had ironed for years before he started ironing his own, the shoes I had bought him with money I could have spent on myself, The meals I made even on nights my body was screaming for rest, the silent, constant devotion I had poured into a man who had spent the last 4 months quietly building a separate life beside the one I thought we shared. I did not cry that first night. The shock was too large for tears. It came later, in pieces, in the middle of ordinary moments, standing at a grocery store aisle we used to shop in together, hearing a song that used to play in his car, finding one of his shirts still folded in a drawer weeks after he had moved out. Grief, I learned, does not arrive in one wave. It arrives in small, unpredictable ones, each time you least expect it. The weeks that followed were some of the strangest of my life. We continued living in the same house for a while, out of financial necessity and the slow grind of American divorce paperwork, becoming strangers under one roof. We spoke only of logistics, bills, the lease, who would tell which relatives, and when. I called my mother one Sunday morning and told her everything without softening a single detail. For the first time in 11 years, I expected her to fall apart. Instead, her voice, thick with sadness, stayed steady. She said, "Navya, beta, you already survived losing your father from 4,000 miles away. You are stronger than you have ever given yourself credit for. This will not break what that did not break." I held on to that sentence for a long time after we hung up. Deepa came that same evening with food I hadn't asked for and didn't have the strength to refuse. She sat with me for hours, saying very little, simply present in the wreckage the way only a true friend knows how to be. At one point, she said quietly, "You built a career here with nothing behind you but a certificate and stubbornness. You are not going to disappear now." I wanted to believe her. Some nights I did. Other nights, I lay awake doing the arithmetic of loss. 11 years, one country, one family left behind, one father I never got to say goodbye to in person, all given to a man who had, in the end, quietly built a separate life on the side of the one we shared. But something in me had already begun to shift, even in that first devastated month. I noticed it in small, almost invisible ways. I stopped waiting for him to come home before eating. I started taking evening walks alone, not to escape the house, but because I discovered I genuinely enjoyed my own company. I began reviewing our finances with a clear-eyed precision I had never allowed myself before, because for the first time, every number belonged only to my own future. The divorce took nearly a year, slowed by paperwork, mediation, and the exhausting task of dividing 11 years into asset columns. Rishabh, to his credit, did not fight over money. Guilt, I think, made him generous in ways love alone never had. He covered the lease until I found my own place and did not contest the modest savings I had quietly built in my own name. My immigration status, tied to our marriage for most of those years, became its own separate battle. I met an attorney named Farah, sharp and precise, who walked me through my options with the same clarity Rishabh once used on spreadsheets, before everything. Because I had been employed and paying taxes under my own name for over 2 years, I had a real, independent case, not as someone's wife, but as a professional in my own right. That distinction meant everything to me. The day my status was approved independently, I sat in Farah's office and felt something I had not expected. Not victory exactly, but solidity, ground that belonged only to me. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment that spring, entirely mine. I painted one wall a deep marigold yellow, a color Rishabh had never liked, and I had therefore never used in 11 years of shared homes. It was such a small act of rebellion, and yet the first time I stood in that room looking at that wall, I cried, not from sadness, but from something closer to relief. I threw myself into work in a way I had never allowed before, when part of my energy had always stayed in reserve for managing our household, our finances, our shared life. Now all of it belonged to my career. Within a year, I was promoted to senior brand strategist. Within 2, I was leading a small team, mentoring junior coordinators who reminded me, in their nervous eagerness, of the woman I had been when I first walked into that office with nothing but a certificate and desperation. I visited India for the first time in nearly 8 years that following winter. I had been afraid of the trip in ways I didn't fully admit beforehand, afraid that returning without a husband, without the life I had once promised my parents I was building, would feel like arriving home in defeat. It didn't. My mother held me at the airport for a long time without saying a word. My sister had saved every photo of my nephew's childhood in a single album, just for me to look through slowly, filling in 8 years of moments I had only ever seen through a phone screen. I visited my father's grave for the first time since his passing, sat there in the winter sun for almost an hour, and told him quietly everything I had never had the chance to say about the marriage, the betrayal, the divorce, and also carefully about the career I had built, the team I now led, the apartment with the yellow wall that was entirely mine. I don't know if he heard me, but saying it out loud, finally, in the place where he rested, felt like closing a door that had been left open for far too long. I think about Rishabh sometimes, though less often now, and with far less weight than I expected to carry forever. I heard, the way these things always travel through community circles, that he eventually moved to Ohio. Whether it worked out with Jennifer or not, I genuinely do not know, and I have realized, somewhat to my own surprise, that I no longer need to know. His life, continuing forward, is simply no longer my terrain to watch. What I carry instead is something steadier. I am 40 years old now. I lead a team of people who trust my judgment. I live in an apartment with a yellow wall I chose myself. I cook what I want to eat, not what someone else prefers. I spend my own salary on myself now, without guilt, without calculation, without asking whether it serves someone else's comfort first. I have a relationship with my own strength that 11 years of marriage, for all its early sweetness, never once required me to build, because I was always too busy building someone else's future to notice I hadn't built my own. I do not regret the years I gave. I do not regret the sacrifices, the missed weddings, the funeral I could only watch through photographs. Those years made me who I am, sitting here today, telling you this story. What I regret, if I regret anything at all, is how long it took me to understand that devotion given to someone who never truly saw it was never really building a shared future at all. But I understand it now, and that understanding, hard won as it was, is mine to keep.